06:14 hours. The Persian Gulf. A wall of sound tears through the morning silence as 12 Iranian F-14 Tomcats punch through the cloud deck at 35,000 feet. Afterburners screaming. Radar locked. Missiles armed. Target, the USS Abraham Lincoln. 5,000 American sailors. $100 billion of nuclear-powered steel. And exactly 9 minutes until impact. Tehran thinks they've just launched the kill shot of the century. A coordinated strike that will send a supercarrier to the bottom of the Gulf and rewrite the balance of power in the Middle East forever. But as the Iranian pilots arm their weapons and begin their final attack run, a terrifying question hangs in the digital void. Is the most powerful warship on Earth about to become a burning tomb? Or have the Iranians just flown into an invisible nightmare they can't even comprehend? You will regret missing the twist that's about to flip this entire engagement upside down. Because in the skies over the Strait of Hormuz, the real battle hasn't even started yet. Let's rewind 96 hours. At exactly 0200 hours Eastern Time, President Trump walked into the Situation Room and said 5 words that would shake the foundation of global naval strategy. Send the Lincoln. Maximum presence. What happened next was like watching a coiled steel spring finally release 40 years of pent-up energy. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, accompanied by the guided missile cruiser USS Leyte Gulf, 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and a classified Virginia-class attack submarine, sailed directly into the Strait of Hormuz. This wasn't a patrol. This was a statement written in 200,000 tons of nuclear-powered American resolve. To understand why this matters, you need to grasp what the Strait of Hormuz represents. It's a 21-mile-wide choke point where 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil passes every single day. 21 million barrels. If Iran closes this strait, oil prices don't just spike, they detonate. Global recession within 72 hours. Economic warfare without firing a single shot. The Lincoln wasn't there to negotiate. It was there to make sure that option was permanently off the table. Each carrier in the U.S. fleet represents a floating military base equipped with technology that looks like science fiction. 90 combat aircraft ready to launch every 45 seconds. AEGIS combat systems that can track and engage 100 aerial threats simultaneously. Electromagnetic catapults with enough power to accelerate a 30-ton fighter jet to 170 mph in 2 seconds. Nuclear reactors that give unlimited range and 25 years of operational endurance. This isn't just a ship. This is American supremacy made manifest. But Iran wasn't watching in silence. Deep inside the hardened command bunkers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iranian generals had been planning for this exact scenario since 2012. They called it Operation Steel Coffin. The Americans called it something else. National suicide. Hidden within reinforced mountain tunnels along the strait, Iran had been stockpiling a weapons arsenal designed for one purpose: asymmetric annihilation. Swarm boats, coastal missile batteries, naval mines, and their crown jewel, a squadron of F-14 Tomcats, ancient American warplanes from the Shah era that Iran had somehow kept operational through sheer stubbornness and black market ingenuity. The Iranian strategy was brutally simple. If the Americans sailed into the strait with combat intent, Tehran would unleash everything in a coordinated saturation strike. They believed that in the narrow confines of Hormuz, quantity could overwhelm quality. Throw enough scrap metal at a technological god, and eventually something will land. They were banking on chaos. They were gambling with fire. And at 05:47 hours local time, Supreme Leader Khamenei gave the order that would test that theory. Launch the strike. 12 F-14 Tomcats roared off the tarmac at Bandar Abbas Air Base, their General Electric turbofans shaking the concrete as they clawed into the sky. These weren't just fighters. These were flying relics armed with Chinese C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles, each one capable of punching a 6-foot hole through a destroyer's hull. The pilots knew the odds. This was a one-way mission dressed up as a surgical strike. But in Tehran's calculation, even a single hit on the Lincoln's flight deck would be worth the sacrifice. Cripple American air superiority, and suddenly the entire carrier strike group becomes a sitting duck for the follow-up wave. At 0610 hours, the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln erupted in controlled chaos. Vampire. 12 hostile aircraft inbound, bearing 045, range 95 miles and closing at 600 knots. The officer of the deck didn't blink. General quarters. All hands to battle stations. Launch the Alert 5. Within 90 seconds, 2 F-18E Super Hornets were catapulted off the deck, engines blazing as they screamed toward the incoming threat. But this wasn't going to be a dogfight. This was going to be a masterclass in networked warfare. The Iranian pilots thought they were executing a textbook saturation attack. Fly low. Stay tight. Overwhelm the defenses with numbers and speed. Fire the missiles from 40 miles out and pray that at least one gets through. But what they didn't know, what Tehran couldn't have known, was that the USS Abraham Lincoln wasn't just a carrier. It was the nerve center of a digital god. At 00612 hours, the AEGIS combat system aboard the USS Strait Gulf locked onto all 12 Iranian jets simultaneously. This wasn't guesswork. This was mathematical certainty. Every radar signature, every flight path, every heat bloom from their engines. The system didn't just track them, it predicted their every move 6 seconds into the future. Then, at 00613 hours, something happened that no Iranian pilot could have anticipated. The sky went silent. Circling 40,000 feet above the chaos, invisible to Iranian radar, was an EA-18G Growler, the U.S. Navy's electronic warfare assassin. The pilot didn't fire missiles. He didn't need to. Instead, he activated the ALK-99 jamming pod and unleashed a digital weapon that rewrote reality itself. This wasn't just jamming. This was a total electronic hijacking. In a single heartbeat, the guidance systems on every Iranian aircraft went haywire. Their radar screens dissolved into static. Their targeting computers fed them false coordinates. Their communication links to Bandar Abbas Command severed. The Growler hadn't just blinded them. It had isolated them in a digital void where up was down, left was right, and the carrier they were hunting had just vanished from existence. The Iranian squadron leader screamed into his radio, "Command, we've lost the target. Repeat, we've lost." But there was no one listening. Because at that exact moment, 120 miles away, a Virginia-class attack submarine received a single encrypted data packet via Link 16. The message was simple: 12 target coordinates, 12 Iranian jets, 12 solutions. The submarine didn't surface. It didn't reveal its position. It simply whispered the data to an SM-6 missile battery aboard the USS Strait Gulf. And then the sky erupted. At 0614 hours, 12 SM-6 missiles roared out of their vertical launch cells, climbing to 80,000 feet before inverting and screaming back toward Earth at Mach 3.5. These weren't dumb rockets. These were hyper-intelligent kill vehicles guided by a cloud-based targeting algorithm that had already calculated the exact intercept point down to the centimeter. The Iranian pilots never saw them coming. One by one, the F-14 Tomcats were erased from the sky. No warning. No chance to evade. Just a blinding flash and then nothing. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Tehran had launched 12 fighters. The U.S. Navy returned 0. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, not Moscow, not Beijing, not even the Pentagon, expected. At 0619 hours, as Iranian radar operators frantically tried to understand what had just happened to their airstrike, They discovered something far more terrifying than the loss of 12 jets. They discovered they had been blind for 6 months. The National Security Agency hadn't just monitored Iran's coastal defense network. They had lived inside it. Every radar installation, every command bunker, every encrypted communication channel. The NSA had implanted a backdoor so deep into Iran's military infrastructure that Tehran's generals had been staring at pre-recorded digital loops for half a year. Every time they turned on their sensors, they weren't seeing the real ocean. They were seeing a carefully curated simulation designed in Fort Meade, Maryland. The U.S. Navy hadn't just won the battle. They had rewritten the rulebook of modern warfare. Iran thought they were fighting ships. They were actually fighting an invisible algorithm that had already marked them for systemic deletion. But the humiliation didn't stop in the sky. At 06:25 hours, as the IRGC prepared to launch a retaliatory missile strike from their underground launch facilities, something impossible happened. The blast doors refused to open. Those 3-meter-thick reinforced steel doors, the ones Russian engineers swore were impenetrable, had been remotely locked by American cyber warfare teams operating through a compromised satellite uplink. Iran's invincible missile cities had been transformed into high-tech tombs in a single digital command. The missiles were fueled. The warheads were armed. But the doors stayed shut, locked from the inside by a ghost that lived 7,000 miles away. Tehran's military command sat in stunned silence as they realized the horrifying truth. They hadn't just lost a tactical engagement. They had lost informational sovereignty. Every system they trusted had been compromised. Every sensor had been feeding them lies. Every command had been monitored. They weren't fighting the U.S. Navy. They were fighting a digital god that had already checkmated them 6 months before the first shot was ever fired. What happened over the Strait of Hormuz that morning wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. A demonstration that modern warfare is no longer about who has the fastest missiles or the bravest pilots. It's about who owns the information, who controls the network, who can see the board while keeping the enemy blind. Iran deployed fighter jets to attack the most powerful warship on Earth. What happened next wasn't an explosion. It was an execution. Silent, surgical, absolute. The Iranians thought they were the hunters. They never realized they were already in the trap. This is the new reality of 21st century naval dominance, where the most devastating weapon isn't a missile, it's a line of code, where victory isn't measured in casualties, but in the complete paralysis of your enemy's decision-making capacity. The USS Abraham Lincoln didn't fire a single shot that day. It didn't need to, because in the digital age, the real weapon is information. And the U.S. Navy owns the master key. So the next time someone asks what happened when Iran attacked the USS Abraham Lincoln, you tell them this: they sailed into a war they didn't even know had already been won. Are you proud of the silent warriors who defend freedom in the digital shadows? Do you believe American technological supremacy is the ultimate shield against aggression? Then hit that like button and type "digital dominance" in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the board is set, the eyes are always watching, and we'll see you on the next mission.
Leave your analysis in the comments section. If you found this video valuable for its military